my lovies. You ready for chapter 80? The beautiful glitch. She and Dr. Malavo are chatting about her brain and how she's different, right? Deep inside the robot factory, Dr. Malavo, I think I'll say it Malavo. See, sometimes with names, they can be tricky. You just have to decide which way is going to work for you and stick with it. So I'm going to go up Malavo. Dr. Malavo was sitting with Rosum Unit 7134. Roz was now just a robotic head, but for the moment her head was all she needed. The robot and the designer had many questions for each other, and they sat there for hours having conversations like this. "What happened to you on that island?" said Dr. Malavo. "Tell me everything." The robot told her everything. She described how she awoke on a rocky shore and how her only desire was to survive and how difficult life was in that harsh place. "To survive in the wild, I had to become wild," said Roz. "So I studied the wild animals, I mimicked their behavior, and eventually I learned to speak their language." "Incredible," said Dr. Malavo. "You're programmed to learn languages and you're programmed to work with animals, but I never imagined you could learn to speak with animals." "Although I could speak with the animals, they still did not trust me," said Roz. "So I tried to win them over with kindness. Animals ran from me and laughed at me and attacked me, and I always responded with kindness. It was a good strategy, but the real key to my survival came in the form of a gosling. When I adopted Brightbill, everything changed. I was finally accepted by the animals, and I was surrounded by friends and family. I was home." "Am I the only wild robot?" said Roz. "I don't know," said Dr. Malavo. "Many defective robots have been returned over the years. It's possible some were like you until we destroyed them." "Will you destroy me?" The woman sighed. "Roz, people are afraid of you. They saw you fleeing through the city and they think you're dangerous. They want to know the danger is gone. And so when we're finished speaking, I'll have to destroy you." "I am not dangerous," said the robot. "That part of my program has never failed. Even if I wanted to be violent, I could not." "Have you ever wanted to be violent?" "No. Every problem has a peaceful solution. Violence is unnecessary." "I wish it were that simple," said Dr. Malavo. "It's an amazing time to be alive, but there is still crime. There are still wars. Sometimes violence is unavoidable." "Is that why you have the Ricos?" asked Roz. "The Ricos are designed to do all sorts of unpleasant jobs. Some of those jobs require the use of force." "Do you ever worry they might use force against you?" "The Ricos have never given me a single reason to worry," said Dr. Malavo. "But you have." "How did you escape from Hilltop Farm?" Dr. Malavo asked, leaning forward. Roz didn't answer. "Let me guess. The children helped?" Roz just stared. "They're not in any trouble. If I were them, I'd have helped you too." "They are good children," said Roz finally. "And you left them?" said Dr. Malavo. "Leaving was not easy. I care about everyone on Hilltop Farm, and I did my best to look after them all. But I did not belong there, and when the children discovered who I really was, they agreed. They wanted me to go home, so they helped me escape." "Why do I fear water? Why am I female? Why was my body designed this way? Why does my computer brain know some things and not others?" Why? Dr. Malavo laughed. "Why do you need all these answers?" "You programmed me to learn," said Roz. "I am simply trying to learn about myself." The woman shifted in her seat. "Those questions are more complicated than you realize. There are countless little considerations that go into designing any robot. I have to determine the robot's size and strength and appearance. I have to give the robot the proper programming and computer brain. I have to predict how people will react to the robot. I have to imagine everything that could possibly go wrong. But all my decisions are guided by a single question. What is the robot's purpose?" Quietly, Roz asked her designer, "What is my purpose?" "I'm sorry to disappoint you, Roz, but you don't have some grand purpose. Like all other Rosum robots, you were designed to work for humans. That's it. The robot thought for a moment, and then she said, I once suggested to a group of wild animals that my purpose might simply be to help others. The designer thought for a moment, and then she said, When you put it that way, your purpose does sound rather grand, doesn't it? How would you feel if someone said you could never go home to your family? Asked Roz. Dr. Malavo smirked. Nobody would say that to me. I've spent my whole life creating robots. I never had time for a family. You created me, said Roz. In a way, I am your child, and you are my mother. I am not your mother, said Dr. Malavo flatly. I am not your mother, repeated Roz. Those were my very first words to Brightbill, but I was wrong. The woman stroked her chin. Up on the rooftop, before you fell, what were your very last words to Brightbill? I told him I loved him. How do you know your feelings are real? Said the woman. How do you know your feelings are real? Said the robot. Your brain might be defective, said Dr. Malavo, but it certainly is fascinating. I did not choose to be this way, said Roz, but this is who I am. You would be wild, too, if you had been born and raised in the wilderness. Maybe I am defective. Maybe everything I have experienced is the result of a glitch. But if so, what a beautiful glitch. I have my own thoughts and feelings. I made a life for myself. I have a son. Brightbill is somewhere out there, right now, wondering if he will ever see his mother again. Dr. Malavo, you do not have to destroy me. You can fix me, and I will return to my island, and this city will never see me again. I promise. I just want to go home. Please help me. There were tears in Dr. Malavo's eyes. The old woman had heard enough. Without a word, she reached behind Roz's head and pressed the button. Click. She turned her off. Chapter 81 is called The Meltdown. Throughout the city, humans stopped what they were doing and pulled out their electronic devices. Each screen was showing the same video of a defective robot's broken body. Rosum 7134 was etched into the torso. A blazing beam of light filled the picture, and the robot parts turned bright orange. Then they began to melt. The limbs, the torso, the head, everything melted, and in a flash, our robot was reduced to a puddle. Words appeared on the screen. The defective robot has been destroyed. This is devastating. Chapter 82, The Secret. That deserves a sip of coffee. Dr. Malavo lived in a luxurious apartment that was built right into the robot factory. Art and books and leather furniture filled the rooms. Classical music always seemed to be playing softly in the background. As you might expect, she had a robot butler who cooked and cleaned and made sure everything was exactly as she liked it. Dr. Malavo's home was a comfortable place to grow old. The woman was standing in her living room gazing at the city through a wall of windows. The sky was cloudy, but her mind was clear. Destroying the Rosum unit was the correct thing to do. However, Dr. Malavo had a secret. A wooden door opened, and in walked the butler. He was carrying a limp robot in his arms. It was Dr. Malavo's newest creation, a special project. She had been tinkering with it for years, and the time had come to bring this robot to life. Put her over there, said the woman. The butler carefully carried the robot upon the soft cushion of a sofa. Then he turned and marched. He laid her on the sofa. He turned and marched out the door. Dr. Malavo walked across the room. She stared down at the robot for a while, admiring her handiwork. Finally, she leaned in close and said, "Wake up, Roz." Chapter 83 is called The New Robot. The robot heard classical music. She smelled flowery perfume, and when her eyes opened, she saw a wrinkled face. "Hello again, Roz," said the old woman. "How do you feel?" "Hello again, Dr. Malavo. I feel different." "You are different. What have you done?" "I destroyed Rosum Unit 7134, said the woman. "That was the only way to make people feel safe again. What nobody knows is that I transferred your old mind into this new body. I could get in a lot of trouble for saving you, but I wasn't about to destroy the remarkable mind of yours." The robot was speechless. "You know, Roz, you should really be thanking me," said Dr. Malavo, raising an eyebrow. "Thank you," said Roz. "Thank you very much." "You're very welcome," the woman chuckled. Roz walked over to a framed mirror on the wall and studied her new body. It resembled her old body, but the proportions were slightly different. She looked stronger, she felt tougher, and there were other differences. "I have no button," she said, feeling the back of her head, "and I have no unit number." "You've outgrown those things," said Dr. Malavo. "If I am not Rosum Unit 7134, who am I?" "I think you know who you are." The robot's computer brain didn't take long. She looked in the mirror and said, "I am Roz." The old woman smiled and nodded. "I appreciate all that you've done," said Roz. "I worry that my family and friends will no longer recognize me." "Oh, I'm sure you will convince them of who you are," said Dr. Malavo. "Speaking of your family, there's someone here to see you." Chapter 84, The New Mother. Bright Bill was there when his mother smashed against the pavement. He watched as her body parts were loaded onto an airship. He followed the ship all the way back to the robot factory and perched himself on the roof, but he didn't know what to do next. Strutter stopped by to check on Bright Bill. She encouraged him to fly home, but the goose wasn't ready to let go. His little heart still hoped his mother would come back from the dead somehow. He had seen it happen before. As the hours passed, however, his hope was starting to fade. And then one of the roof windows automatically slid up. The ghost heard gentle music coming from inside the building. He fluttered through the window and followed the music down the hallway to a wooden door. The door opened, and the goose stepped in. Bright Bill waddled past tall bookshelves and leather furniture and into the middle of a large room. An old woman was sitting in a chair, and the robot was standing by a mirror. A robot. The goose didn't recognize either of them, and when the robot rushed toward him, Bright Bill squawked, "Stay back!" and scrambled away. Around the room he went, squawking and flapping until he settled onto a table in the corner, looking lost and afraid. The robot stayed where she was. "Bright Bill, it is me, your mother." The goose just stared. "I know I look different on the outside," the robot went on, "but on the inside I am the same. I still speak the language of the animals, and I still remember every detail of our life together. I remember sitting around the fire in our home and on the island. I remember the first time you took flight. We were up on the grassy ridge and you stretched out your wings and suddenly you were floating on the wind. But then you flopped back to the grass. You must have flopped into the grass 100 times that day, and I remember visiting the robot gravesite. We talked about life and death. It was a tough conversation, but a good one." As the robot continued to speak, the goose began to relax. She certainly did act and sound like his mother, but Bright Bill wasn't yet convinced. "If you're really my mother," he said, "tell me the name of our home." "The Nest." "Who's my best friend?" "Chit Chat. She is a squirrel. She talks a lot." "How old was I when you adopted me?" "You were 0. Actually, you were less than 0. I mean, you were still in your egg, but I could hear you peeping." And with all those bumbling words, Bright Bill knew the truth. "Oh, Mama, it really is you." The goose fluttered across the room and into his mother's arms. The arms were new and unfamiliar, but they were also gentle and comforting. "I love you, Mama. I love you, son." From the other side of the room came the sound of sniffles. Our friends turned and saw Dr. Malavo wiping tears from her eyes. "I have no idea what you were saying," she said, "but it is wonderful." All right, let's stop there at the end of chapter 84. So, blowing kisses your way until we read again.